Hello and welcome to today's video. The last one we worked on the fuselage, as you can see there, but this one we're going to work on the wings, weapons and tailplanes. Now I've already stuck in the first resin wheel bay. Next is I've got to cut this bit out and stick in the next wheel bay that I'm going to show you here. Get it the right way around, you knobber, and it should fit in like that, like so. You can see that I'm using Tamiya side cutters to cut away all the redundant plastic that I don't need. I'm going as easy as I can. I've sped it up, obviously I don't normally go that fast, but either way, if you cut too much out, then you're only going to have to fill it back in, so go quite easy. But either way, I didn't, and I absolutely cocked it up on one little tiny bit as usual because it's me. But either way, so keep doing this. It's the quickest and easiest way of doing it like this, rather than having to take like I don't know, a saw or a sanding stick or something like that. It's just so much easier to cut away all the plastic, and then you're just left with a tiny bit to sand down, and it's just so much easier, so much less hassle. And there we have it. That is what it should look like when you've just cut all the detail off. So leave it as that, and then obviously sand it down. I've not shown you how to do that, it's self-explanatory. And the trick that Lenny's taught me is to put some white tack or blue tack on the back, just to stop it from moving about, so that you can glue it in situ. So you look round on the other side, just make sure it's square like so. Make sure it's square to both sides and as even as you can. You can use the landing gear to square it up even more. And then, as you can see here, I've glued it all in and all made sure it's nice and square. You can tack it in, it's a bit like welding really. Tack it in a couple of places. Now, oi! 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 Rob! Rob! Oi! Shut up! Oh God, Jesus Christ, what a knob! Oi! Pack it in! Oh my God. How loud was that? Anyway, so what I'm using here is it's relatively standard nail file that my missus got for her work, and it's cheap, cheerful, but it does the job. And I'm using this at full speed. As you can see there, I'm moving it across the surface very quickly, and that's for two main reasons. One, you don't want to put too much heat into there, and two, you don't want to burn through one particular area. And there we go. As you can see, it looks very thin on the back and definitely thin at the front, so you don't want to do too much like I've just done here. Oh Jesus.
Yeah. Oh, fucking twat.
Yes, thank you. I knew that was coming. Well, yeah, I'd gone through slightly. Don't forget to obviously cut the detail off on the top part of the wing as well, like I did, and then realised that there was a 4mm gap, and then I saw that the detail was still there, so don't forget that. And after that beautiful bit of sanding, you're left with this pile of shite. And yes, I am nodding my head as I say this, but I wear a mask. I honestly wear a mask. No, I don't wear a mask. Alright, I don't wear a mask. I should do, but I don't. But anyway, ooh, pretty lines. Time for a party, I think. Okay, so I'm not condoning drug taking whatsoever, at all. Anyway, so as I said before, I got a nick through there, so just put some super glue on there and wipe it down. Next bit is showing you how thin it is when I sanded down the top wing section. It's very, very thin. In fact, uber thin. I can't sand any more down at all on there. And then it's just a case of test fitting. Just making sure that it does actually fit and it closes. You don't want to be pushing down on it. As you can see, I'm not doing very much pushing on there whatsoever. And just check from the side to also make sure that it's not actually pushing up. Okay, so now putting on the wing end plates. Now we're putting these on for two main reasons. One, that it keeps the structural integrity of the wing, and plus we can glue some brass rod in there to make sure it's all square. Now next thing is to make sure that B6 and B4 are glued in, unlike Lenny. He forgot to glue his in, but I haven't. So this is part of the flap system, so don't forget it. One thing that I have noticed about this kit, and I'm very surprised about, is how good the wing to fuselage fit is, especially on mine anyway. So the front and back, there's hardly no gap to talk about really. One thing that I've been trialling over years, and it has kind of worked, is if you take, in this case, a number 11 blade and take the back of it, you can get it more square, as in the level top and bottom. If you run a finger, you've got more of a chance of sort of pushing one down, or either or. So here I am gluing in. I'm using the quick set glue just for speed because it says it on the tin, and I'm just gluing down there, just making sure that I've got a good amount. I can't stick any more in there other than like what I'm going to do at the front, which is slightly different but better join. Again, sticking some more quick set in there at the front. I might have blobbed a bit too much on there, but this is what I do. I put some super glue in there. I just chuck a blob in there like so, and then I take an old airbrush needle, which I'll do in a minute when I get round to it. There we go. And I shove it through the other intake and just slosh it around a bit, and there we have it. So this is what we're going to show you next, is putting the top wing join on there. Now we're not going to get a gap there, hopefully, and we're going to get something similar. So it's just a case of chucking it on, as you can see, and it does actually fit really well out the box. I'm quite surprised at it, to be honest with you. But what we can do, and this is why I said do not glue the cockpit in, is that you can shove an airbrush needle through the intake, or the exhaust shall I say, and push the fuselage up against the wing. And hopefully you can see that. It's very hard. But here I'm just using the Tamiya thicker glue, the white top glue, and just putting a bead on the front as much as I can. And also what I'm going to do is put some super glue on there just to give it some bite. I want it to stick straight away and stick as literally immediately. I don't want anything to stop me from pushing the fuselage up against this. So here we go, sticking it on. And again, just make sure everything's square. Worst thing you can do in this situation is find out that it's not square. So the trick to this is pushing the airbrush needle through the exhaust hole against the part of the fuselage that you need to go against the wing. So I'm resting the needle against the desk, pushing down with my left hand on the fuselage, which in turn pushes the fuselage out against the wing. And now I'm chucking enough super glue in, what I need really, to be honest with you, and where I need it. And then it's a case of putting some kicker in there, leaving it to dry, and then I'm coming in here with some quick dry Tamiya extra thin. As it says on the tin, this is what I need. And then I'll leave it for probably about 24-48 hours to make sure, and I keep an eye on it to make sure it doesn't move. And as you can see there, I've eliminated as much, if not all, the gap there. So that is what I'm do on most, if not all, the kits. Okay, so next bit is doing the outer wing section. Now, as you can see here, it's just basically 3 parts, nothing really major to talk about. But one thing I have noticed is that the actual wing join is really good out of the box, to be honest with you. I've not messed or played around with this whatsoever, but the other wing join is not as good. I'll explain that in a minute. But either way, So 3 parts there gluing together, and then the wingtip going on, which I'll explain what I've done about that in a minute. And this is what it should look like. 4 parts glued together. Great. One thing I've got to note is that you've got to sand these 2 areas down. The reason being is that the actual wing is too thick for the outer wingtip. So I'm showing you how to sand there, so next I'll be showing you how to suck eggs. But either way, so if you can imagine these 2 R's being glued together, and I'm grabbing the wing the wingtip, and I'll show you the difference in chord between the wing and the wingtip. Now it needs a bit more sanding, but either way you need to do that. So this neatly moves us on to the outer wing sections and gluing them on. Now as you can see, I've basically crossed parts out. I'm not going to put them on because they don't fit, but either way, the outer wing section, as you can see, this is the better one of the 2, and it, as you can see, there's hardly any step gap whatsoever. It's all glued in very nicely, and as so the wingtip. I've got some shit on there, but either way, very, very nice fit. So we're showing you the first one, and as I said earlier, I'm not gluing them on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pin them front and back, and this is the second wing join, and this one is, and it's always one compared to the other is not the same, and it's always the case with me. I don't know if it's the same with you, but this is not as good. There seems to be a discrepancy between the front and the back. Either you get the front right and the back's wrong, or whatever, and typically the bottom fits perfectly, the bit that you're not going to see. So what I'm doing here is lining the wing sections up to make sure the holes line up. And then I can drill out the corresponding holes. So I'm drilling this one a bit bigger, and I'm drilling a hole which wasn't a hole at the front for the brass rod to fit. And here it is, the brass rod, 1 mil thick, 305mm long. And now I'm going to struggle for about 20 minutes to try and get the bag open, because I always struggle to get the sweets open. I don't know why it's always me. Now I take the brass rod and take a rough guess. Basically I had the outer wing section on, and I sort of about there, and then I take it off the wing and use some Tamiya side cutters just to cut it, and it goes flying across the room. Literally, he went flying across the room, nearly killed the cat. So next I shove it in, and then I sort of take a rough guess at the angle. So I sort of bend it into a position like so, and then put the outer wing section on, and hopefully I should get it around about near, which is about there. So I need to keep bending it to get it to the point where I want it. Then it's a case of putting the centre brass rod in, well, the centre pin, and then I can again cut it, and this one did kill the cat, and then put the outer wing on, and because it's straight, it goes on straight perfectly. You might need to bend it up because it's bent up. Now this is the problem I had, trying to get everything square. Now the brass rod is already square, I've done it already. Now it's trying to get the wing square, so I'm trying to find what the problem is, and I thought I found the problem, and that's the thickness of the inner wing section that joins to the fuselage. If I push it down, the gap seems to go and the rocking issue goes. So brass rod is in as well, at least on one side, and it's done on the other side, and it is absolutely solid, as you can see there. All I did was just put some super glue on the brass rod itself and shoved it in. Oh my god, I can see so many innuendos on this one. But either way, it didn't go together on the other side like this, to be honest with you. I glued them all together on one side, but obviously you've got to improvise, and in this case I've had to. So a bit of a wiggling, and it does actually fit really quite well, and it goes together as it should, nice and solid and square, as you can see from the front. Top and bottom is even. There's a bit of a step, but either way I'm going to have to live with it. Before I commit to glue though, I did notice that there was a discrepancy in the fit on the bottom, so I'm just sanding down there. And also what I'm going to do next is trim the corners with the number 11 scalpel. Again, I just found a bit of a fit issue, to be honest with you, and there we go, it fits a lot better. To be fair, it's annoying, but there's still a rocking going on, and I believe it should be somewhere on the top, but we'll find out in a minute. And lo and behold, it was the top. So I sorted it out off camera, no big issue, to be honest with you, but now I can stick some super glue on it and get it stuck together finally. So again, sticking super glue onto the joins of the two brass pins, and then very quickly, bang, and not so bang, there we go. So glue it together and just leave it as be. You can stick some kicker on there, but you might need 3 hands, because I was holding that with 2 hands, so I called the missus out, and there we have it. So that's both the wing half joins. One thing I have got to note is, and I know I'm showing you this, is that the outer wingtip, oh yeah, and one thing of note is at the bottom rear wing joint, I'll put some super glue on there. Make sure you fill them bits, because there's a gap. Moving on, you're doing the rear tailplanes. Now there's 2 halves glued together, self-explanatory, and then it's a case of gluing these little winglets on, and they fit like that, and they fit perfectly, and I do mean perfectly, and there's 4 of them fit perfectly, so nothing really to show you there. Nice one. It absolutely fits perfectly, and I do mean perfectly. There's no gaps whatsoever anywhere. So next, and as you can see here, and yes, I'm using a ruler to measure the distance between the tailplane and the tail, and it worked out to be 82mm. And now I'm gluing the other wing section, or tailplane shall I say, using Tamiya quick set again, top and bottom, and I worked out it was 0.5mm out on this side. So moving on neatly to the tyres and the main landing gear, which is very nice. Deburring, make sure that the tyres are deburred, because obviously it doesn't fit as square, the hub I mean, and then what you want to do is put the hub in there. Make sure that it's pushed all the way in and glued in tight before you move on to deburring the back of it. If you don't do this, the 2 halves of the tyres don't fully match and don't meet all the way. Put the centre hub in the back, and then obviously glue this in. Again, I'm using Tamiya quick set. I seem to be going to this quite often, it sets quickly. And then deburr the other side of the tyre. If you don't do this, it won't go together. I have noticed that, well, I noticed it when I was test fitting using Tamiya white top, and then there we have it, it's all done. In modelling, sometimes you mess up, but landing gear, you can't really fuck it up, to be honest with you, and I'll explain why. So what I use is a number 11 blade, and I scrape the seam line down to where there is nothing there. That's all I do. I just keep scraping until there's nothing there. Even if I do make a flat spot, I don't care, because what I do after that is, and I'll get round to it in a second, there we go. So I use a sanding stick to re-profile the curve or whatever, mainly sort of a sponge type sanding stick, and here we go, I'll show you again. So a bit of a thicker seam line, scrape and scrape, scrape. Might have gone a bit flat on the edge, so I sand down and I take it from there. So it's not that bad, to be honest with you. Just keep scraping. I'll show you a third time. Keep scraping and keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going until it's gone, and then you should be fine. And then it's just a quick case of sanding down again. Job's a good one. Can't go wrong with that. And there we have it. That is basically what I do, and if you follow that routine, you can't go wrong. So before we get on to the weapons, we've got to do the RATO packs, the rocket assisted takeoff, and generally speaking this is what you end up with. So I've got to drill out the ends, I know, but I'll do that just before paint. And if you do it in this order, so glue on these two parts. There's only one way it can go on. I'm trying to figure out which way it goes, but the holes are bigger just to accept these long rods. Oh dear, innuendo's coming back. Now this pattern here, just make sure it's that way up, and then opposite way around you glue the next part on. I'm not going to show you gluing it on, but it goes that way, and then you glue into the middle part. Now I got confused, it didn't want to sort of fit into there, but eventually it does. It kind of, well, it does, but I had a bit of a faff. When that's glued in, then you glue into this bottom part here, so these two parts, again making sure that it's following the pattern on the other side, so make sure it's that way around. So if you remember me saying that this pattern that I'm sticking some glue on has got to be on a particular way round, well, this is because of this next part. As you can see, the top of it, that is what connects to the fuselage, so it's got to be one way round. And then what we're doing here is making sure we've got the fuselage, we've got the right RATO pack for the right side, and then we've stuck the rod in, and then I've not glued it in, I'm just checking to make sure it fits between the two holes. Oh my god, here we go, innuendo time. And then make sure it's square. Hooray! On to the weapons. Now the torpedo. I'm going to glue these four parts together, and hopefully when it all goes together it should fit onto here. So let's do that. Now it's four parts. It's not rocket science, to be honest with you, but it does go together really well ish in a fashion. And I did think that trying to glue the torpedo together and stick it in, but it's not going to work, don't fit. And again, I'm not going to show you how to glue two halves together, but suffice to say it does go really well. And you've got the rear fin section that again fits really well, so you can't go wrong with that. On to the next bit of long list of jobs to do on this kit, and it's the intakes. So I've already glued one of them on. Again, it's not rocket science at all, but it does fit. There's no gaps, that's one good thing, but the only bad thing is that there's a step which needs to be sanded out, which I'll do later. Nothing really to explain there, but this is the one bit that I need to show you. So I've cut that off. I'm now sanding it off because it doesn't actually fit to the intake, and there again it does actually fit on reasonably well, which I'm going to show you there, so nothing too bad at all. One thing I'd like to do with this kit is have the canopy slid back so I can see in the cockpit, but B10 is stopping me doing that. Bad B10. Bad B10. Either way, B10 does not fit, as you can see here. It slides all over the place and I'm not particularly liking it. So what I've done is I've super glued it to some plastic card so it doesn't move around, and then I'm using some vernier calipers to scribe around it, 0.5 of a mil bigger, so I've got something to profile to, so that I can fill that gap basically. And then when I've done that, I'm showing you what it looks like when it's finished. I should have highlighted it with some wash or something like that, but either way it's there. And then when it's cut out, it looks something like that, nothing resembling the original part, which when you hold it in sort of that position there, as I'm showing you there, it should profile down to something looking a bit like this. Now this is, I kid you not, a million, probably 2 million times that I've test fitted this, sanded it down, test fitted it. I've kind of sanded it down a bit too much at the back, but with the canopy over the top you're not going to see it, but with it test fitting there it does actually fit. So I'm going to live with that. I might fill it with some triple P, but either way. Now with that bit done, we can now use B10 to fit inside the canopy, but We've got one problem. B10 does not allow the canopy to sit flush. Bad B10. But there's a reason here. B10 is too wide for the canopy itself. It needs to sit flush with the canopy. So with a bit of sanding and a lot of swearing, it will fit. Oh yes, onto masking canopies. This is the bit I like. Now some of you might be thinking, ooh, you sadist. You like masking canopies? Well, yes I do actually. I find it very therapeutic. It's fun, really fun. So what I'm using here is a cocktail stick and a finger to burnish all the tape down, especially around the edges. Nothing too elaborate, just don't crack the canopy like I do. But to cut in the tape now, and I'm showing you a lighter shade there and a darker shade there. Now the reason why I'm showing you that is because you want to see a darker shade. That is where you're going to cut. Now generally speaking, I have the frame on my side, as in the frame of the canopy, and the bit you want to leave away from you, and that's how I cut. Go slowly with a fresh blade. It needs to be fresh, brand spanking new, and then cut. And just make sure that you sort of, it's a bit like rescribing, make sure it's sort of angled towards you ever so slightly, and it will follow the actual frame, and you should be fine. Either that or you're going to get a lot of brown trouser moments. But again, I've heard people say on YouTube that you need to have so much light in your face and you're going to get blind. It's all bollocks. You can do it out the window. Here the light's not shining in my face, it's shining either side or what have you, and I'm cutting away, so I'm not getting blind because it's very hard to do it in camera. To be honest with you, it was very hard to cut this in camera and show you what I see, and it's impossible to show you how I cut the inside because I've done the inside canopy part as well, but hopefully I should find a canopy that will do the whole lot. But either way, just keep going nice and slow. Generally speaking, you don't really want to be taking the blade off, but I'm having to do it because of the camera, because I can't really see. I'm looking through the camera lens to see what I'm doing. I'm cutting the final bit here, just making sure that everything's cut. Worst thing is when you're taking the tape off that you find something that's not cut, and then you think, oh you prick. Either way. And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen, the completed-ish Wyvern. So obviously first video we've done all the fuselage and everything, cockpit and this, that and the other. This one we've managed to complete the wings and everything else, as you've already seen from this video. So a couple of things that I've not shown yet, so it's the flaps and air brakes, and not only that, the rockets. So literally it's just a few parts, nothing to go over on that. As you can see, the canopy fits and it's on, which looks very resplendent, very cool, and the prop works. But one thing I have got to mention, and Lenny did laugh at me, I broke the rear wheel.
Christ almighty, what a wanker!
Sorry, Sarge.
Totally agree on that. But anyway, thank you for watching, and I will see you again on the next video. Cheerio.